Hello and welcome to another episode of World Football Summit at Home. My name is Paco Roche, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Justin Tan, who is Managing Director for China at the Mailman Group, a global sports digital agency in which leading sport entities around the world rely on to grow their brand in the Chinese and Asian market. Justin, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. And before we start, first and foremost, we'd like to know how you are doing health-wise, how is your family, and how is the rest of the team at the Mailman Group?
Hi, Paco. So first and foremost, thanks for having me join this video chat. By and large, life is coming back to normal. Offices are open, shopping malls are open, restaurants, gyms. We are also back to 100% staffing inside the Mailman China office. So by and large, life getting back to normal, and thankfully, everyone's safe and happy. Yeah.
Since in China, where you're based, things are finally going back to normal, as you were mentioning. My first question is, what does the future look like?
Right. So, in terms of emerging from COVID-19, so for China, we are a little ahead in terms of the timeline. We're a little ahead of the timetable. So, in terms of what to expect in the future, we do think that the world will look a little different. Coming out from COVID-19, and there are a few key trends. There are key factors that we think will be important for the sporting industry, for both in terms of the clients that we work with and, for the sports audience in general. So here's a few things that you can, look forward to, well, that we can all look forward to. So first and foremost is that we see the shift towards, to the shift in content towards more virtual events, right? So that's really in recognition of the reality right now, whereby given the whole stay at home, given the whole quarantine restrictions that we had in place, people did gravitate towards virtual communities, interacting with their immediate groups online as opposed to physical proximity. So virtual events, we see that that's going to be a big trend going forward, both in terms of consumer audience preferences, as well as that being an opportunity for a lot of big, sports organizations and brands to take advantage of. Uh, in terms of that new normal, I think there are a few other trends that will be important. So one is actually the shift towards e-learning, right? That's already happening in China, whereby a lot of activities are moving to online, and that e-learning in terms of, for example, learning a new language, learning a new skill, learning how to cook, yoga classes. So all of that has shifted to that digital format, to that e-learning format. So I see that as something which will remain with us, coming out from COVID-19. The other part of it is that given the restrictions on physical retail, so e-commerce has actually seen, a boost, in the Chinese market. Yeah. So for this one, so to be sure, e-commerce has always been big in China. But I think the COVID-19 restrictions and the impact on consumer behavior has led to it becoming even bigger. And I think that trend, that impact is actually here to stay. Finally, I think a note in terms of the sports audience behavior, or the consumer sentiments, we do see that shift towards having that focus on health, fitness, nutrition. Essentially, the recognition and the desire to live better, to eat better. So that's definitely at least looking at the data coming from China, that's going to be a key shift in consumer perceptions, in consumer sentiments.
Justin, one of the things that the industry is more concerned about these days is the possibility that after this, people will be reluctant to attend and come together at major events. What perception do you have on this based on what you're seeing these days in China?
When restrictions started to be relaxed, that there was some apprehension about gathering together, right? Yeah, but that slowly went away. So if you actually look at the restaurants, shopping malls in China, by and large, I would say that it's getting back to normal again. That people do gather for meals. I would say that, what's different is that people have a greater sense of like personal hygiene. People have a greater sense of personal safety. But that's not to say that, that we will stop hanging out together, because again, that we believe that the human desire for community, human desire, for interaction. So that really remains, right? So it's just that, we are a lot more careful. We are a lot more aware of like the health precautions. But it's not to say that, that we'll stop, going out to activities altogether. It's just a greater recognition of, balancing, the risk versus, wanting to go out and live life as normal.
Justin, Mailman specializes in digital content, actually, and is a partner, as we said before, to some very important sport properties around the world. How have you been helping your partners keep their fans engaged during the past months?
Yeah. So during the past months, with the lockdown, and I guess not having live sports. So what we have done is to work on a content to work on a content pivot together with our clients, right? So in terms of that content pivot, it's really finding new ways to engage our audiences, right? So without live sports, so what we have done is develop a new content formats to develop a new creative content to engage our audiences, as well as I would say something I mentioned earlier, that virtual events that really helps to tie in not just fans, but fans, influencers, grassroots leaders, as well as players, like the legends of the game, as well as like the people who actually work at the sporting organizations. So I think a little more about virtual events, right? I think that's something which has proven to be very powerful for us. And it's powerful in terms of being able to deliver something new and innovative for our audiences here in China, as well as being able to engage different stakeholders in a game, right? So recently, so that has been, a popular format, in China, and we have been driving that, a lot with our key clients, right? So I think that's an example of finding a new value. That's an example of, being creative with our content, pivoting towards, the new ways that we can actually deliver value to our audiences. And as a part of that content pivot, it's also finding the new value in a lot of archive content that a lot of our clients have. And again, that's also a good opportunity, because if you actually look at the sports audience that we have in China, some of them are actually on the younger side. So these are your millennials, these are your post millennials, right? So I think this current Lao and having a live competition has also allowed us to focus a lot more on educational, on a heritage content that we can use to educate our fan audiences in terms of the DNA of a lot of the sports organizations that we work with. So all in all, I think this period has actually really driven us to be more innovative. And in truth, a lot of invention actually comes out from necessity. And I think that's something that we have done decently well for this market.
Justin, I was about to ask you about archive content, because I was talking to the 11 Sports managing director in Portugal a couple of days ago, and he told me that he was surprised because millennials were actually thrilled these days watching games from, for example, Eusebio's Benfica, which obviously they had never seen before, and he thinks that this can actually open new, interesting revenue streams for football properties.
So yeah, so I think there's definitely an opportunity in terms of being able to deliver or reinvent a lot of that content, drawing on like the archive footage, to really present it in new modern formats, but really touching on like the historical topics, and like the making it in a way that resonates with the younger audiences here. So all in all, like that is one opportunity, because because of the situation around COVID-19, everyone really has to take a step back and actually see, hey, what new ways can we actually engage the audiences? So I think that's actually been one of the by effects from this reduction in live or new sports content that we can give our audiences. It has almost forced us to go back and actually look at and look at like what existing assets that we have that we can actually put across to the audiences here.
Justin, Asia has been a key market for European clubs for quite some time now. How do you think their strategy towards this region will evolve after this crisis? Will clubs increase their presence, considering that it seems to be the first market to recover from this crisis?
Absolutely. From a timeline perspective, I would imagine that Asia will be a even more important market for a lot of the sports organizations and the clubs as well. So from that perspective, yes, right. At the same time, I think this situation has also forced a lot of clubs and leagues to further digitize their business, right? So I think what it's going to result in is actually really defining, who's the most valuable audience that you have. So I think the realization will be that, it's actually not just the home market audience that will be important, but also the international audience, right? So definitely we see that a pivot towards, the further digitization of the sports business. We see, a greater focus on international fans and, being able to deliver value to international fans. So really, again, I think that's actually one of the by effects from this from COVID-19 that really will force clubs and leagues to really look at what is their catchment area. So it's not really just Europe, but really the whole international community of fans would actually emerge as as fans that actually bring the value to the business. So in terms of going back to what you just said, definitely yes. I think that Asia will be of even more importance to the leagues and the clubs. And beyond Asia, that I imagine that other international markets will be areas that the clubs will pay more attention to. Yeah.
We were talking about content and fan engagement. That's
Mm-hmm.
definitely two areas that are most likely to change after this crisis. But in what other ways do you think the sports industry will change? What opportunities do you envision in the near future?
Yeah, so I think this ties back, to uh, audience and consumer sentiments. So what I mentioned earlier is that generally speaking, there's this greater focus on health, fitness, nutrition. So I think there is an opportunity for sports clubs, sports, the organizations to really define, what is the scope of expertise, right? So my fundamental belief is that it's not going to be just football. This will actually go beyond football. So in this case, what can a football club teach audiences in Asia about sports nutrition, for example, right? What can sports clubs actually teach people is that, hey, if you only have 15 minutes at home, this is what you can do to actually keep fit. This is what you can do to actually engage your kids, right? So it's really, I think there will be an opportunity for, sports leagues, organization, clubs to play a bigger part in their fans' lives, and at the same time be able to widen their catchment area in terms of, potential fans, right? So I think this will essentially lead to a lot of football brands in terms of expanding, just expanding beyond football and going into a lot of adjacent areas, right? So there is a lot of potential in this because at the end of the day, I do see a lot of emerging interest from our audiences, and at the same time, I see potential for sports, leagues and clubs to actually help to meet that interest in additional areas.
Justin, what you were mentioning now reminded me of the huge success that athlete-driven content, like for example Joe Wicks' PE lessons on YouTube, is having these days. We were obviously already aware of the power of athlete-driven content, but do you think that in the future we will be seeing properties, clubs, and sponsoring brands further leverage the power of their athletes as content creators?
So so Paco, so that's a really good point. In terms of that content creation process, in terms of the origination, we do see that becoming a lot more diverse going forward. It's actually not just the team or the league that actually produces content, we see that like a lot of collaborations with players to produce content as well, and also with like the influencers and fans, right? So we do see that like in terms of the content creation, it's not going to just come from the official voice, right? It's also going to come out like from the more grassroots driven approach. In this case, like a club producing content together with like with their most active fans, a club producing content with some of the influencers that they know well, and at the same time like athletes also producing content. So going forward, in terms of the content creation, it's going to be a mix of different voices. You have the official, you have the athlete, and you also have the more fan-driven ones, right? And all in all, I think it will add up to a more diverse and exciting content mix for audiences. And we do believe that this is the right approach, like going forward. Yeah.
Extending on that idea, Justin, Mailman Group partners with different stakeholders within the industry, clubs, leagues, sponsors, and others. Do you think that in the future we'll be seeing these stakeholders coming together to create integrated marketing strategies that can actually allow them to find value in each other and ultimately to add value to the product as a whole?
So I would say that like before COVID-19, this was already the trend. This was already the smart thing to do, right? Now, coming into COVID-19 and coming out from COVID-19, I would say that like a lot of the different stakeholders have actually found new value in each other, in terms of being able to work together to work through a tough situation, being able to work together to find new ways to engage with audiences. And that's going to be a format that remains, like if even as the world recovers from the virus, right? So to your point, that integration, that collaboration between the stakeholders, I think that's definitely going to be one of the big takeaways from this, and that's definitely going to be one of the smarter ways that like the different stakeholders will look to each other going forward as well.
One of the clear trends that have emerged these days are esports. We've seen traditional sport properties such as La Liga or the Formula One World Championship, for example, rely on esports to keep their fans engaged through virtual competitions in which esports athletes and traditional sport athletes have competed against each other. Competitions that, on the other hand, have had a very significant following, not only in specialized esport platforms, but also in traditional media. Do you think this trend will remain once traditional sports resume, or do you think this is somehow going to mark a turning point in the way traditional sports and esports interact in the future?
So I think increasingly esports will actually become more and more mainstream, right? So I think the lines of division between traditional sports and esports is going to be a lot. So it's going to be blurred going forward. In fact, it's also going to start to break down. So you would actually see that like esports is just going to become a bigger part of our sports fabric, right? So per what you just said, hey, traditional media reporting on esports also integrating some of the best practices from traditional sports. I think that's the trend that will continue, like in the near future. You're already starting to see a lot of interactions between traditional sports and esports. For example, like the NBA actually held that 2K NBA 2K competition that actually had a lot of NBA players themselves participating, right? Yeah. So I think that's really that recognition that esports is actually not just a new sporting format. It's also a very popular culture. It's also a lifestyle-driven phenomenon as well. Yeah. So as such, I think esports will continue to be bigger. So much so that like it will start to integrate itself into traditional sports, and in the future, it will just become a mainstream format.
Thank you very much, Justin. It was a real pleasure talking to you today and somehow sneak peeking into the future. We feel far more optimistic now after talking to you. We look forward to seeing you soon, face to face, in Madrid for WFS 20 if possible, if not in World Football Summit Asia, which, as you know, unfortunately we were forced to postpone this year, but that will certainly take place in the future. Thank you very much, Justin, and take care.
I guess we look forward to seeing you in September.